The city of Orario is quite lively as it is resided by some of the many mythological gods who once ruled the world. These entities arrived in the world by sacrificing their authority to use any of their powers other than their blessing that they used to boost the stats of humans who are part of their families called Familia. Bel Cranel is another new adventurer and a part of Hestia's Familia who has a pretty colorful life. We meet Bel for the first time as he is about to be slaughtered by a minotaur but is luckily saved by a gorgeous blonde woman. After pretty close to losing his life, Bel decides to risk it again as he heads straight to the Adventurers Guild in town to have a word with the receptionist Aina. Aina is trying to scold Bel for his reckless actions, but he was rather interested in getting to know about the blonde woman from earlier. Aina picks up on how Bel had fallen in love with Ais Wallenstein at first sight, and she remarks that Bel will have to get quite a bit stronger before he stands a chance to get even close. Being the cheerful soul, Bel heads to his Familia house to meet up with Hestia, where the two seem to be living an okay life despite their Familia being dirt poor and Bel being the only member so far. Hestia proceeds to do a usual stat check on Bel, who didn't have any skills or magic power until now, as surprisingly, his first skill turns out to be one that lets him grow his stats quickly. Hestia doesn't tell Bel about the skill just yet, and Mr. Optimistic straight up heads back to the dungeon while having an embarrassing encounter with a maid named Sire down the road. Bel's desire to catch up to Ais helps him to stay motivated throughout his adventure, and the skill acts up pretty quickly as Bel already shows signs of massive stat jumps. Bel was rather happy with his progress, and he later visits the same restaurant to have dinner. Bel was pretty cheerful when Ais entered with Loki Familia, but his mood turned around quickly when BT from Loki started to make fun of that one idiot who was almost killed by a minotaur if it wasn't for Ais. BT stresses how that fool was hiding behind a woman, and even though these comments were harsh, Bel realizes that BT is making a valid point here. This reality check turns out to be too much for poor Bel's heart, and he ends up running away in tears. That night, Bel had headed straight to the dungeon, and he returned back to Hestia in the next morning, covered in wounds, remarking how he now has the desire to get stronger. After his reckless adventure, Hestia is absolutely shocked to see Bel's growth later on, and she reveals how Bel will be a strong adventurer if he keeps trying hard like this. For some odd reason, Hestia still refrains from telling Bel about his skill, and after a little counseling session, Hestia decides to head over somewhere for a good few days. Bel had gotten his head straight by now, and he corrected his mistake by heading to the restaurant and paying them for last night's food. Bel gets an earful from the restaurant owner, Mamma Mia, and receives a little gift from Sire, who presumably has a crush on him. Bel continues to head over to the dungeon again, while Hestia is revealed to be attending a fancy party, where other people of her kind were invited as well. While Hestia was away, Bel is shown to be hanging around town, looking at expensive equipment as he cannot afford it due to their Familia's financial situation. Hestia's main goal for attending the party was to request Hephaestus to make a weapon for Bel, and even though Hephaestus was not interested at first, she ends up complying after seeing Hestia literally beg for it. After revealing just how much she wishes for Bel to grow as an adventurer, Hestia somehow convinces Hephaestus to make her a weapon, but Hephaestus strictly remarks how she will still need the payment for it no matter how long Hestia drags it. As Hephaestus was busy deciding on what to make, Bel was requested by the maids of the restaurant to deliver Sire's wallet back to her as she had left it behind in excitement. Bel accepts the job, but when he was on his way, we see how an unknown woman is at a meeting with Loki where she's requesting info about a person who fits Bel's description exactly. The blade is completed by this time, and Hestia straight up heads over to find Bel as she asks him to come on a little date. The woman from earlier seems to be quite crazy, as after not getting the intel she needed, she decides to take matters into her own hands by releasing a white ape for Bel to deal with alone. Bel ends up having to confront the ape, and after his own knife just straight up breaks after coming in contact with the monster, he decides to lock Hestia in a safe tunnel so he can buy time for her to reach safety. A sudden flashback takes us back in time to show how Bel decided to become an adventurer after his grandpa left this world, and how he got shunned by every single other Familia until he came across Hestia and became her family. Bel's desire to protect his family makes him move forward alone, and in the meanwhile, back at the Colosseum, where the ape had run away from, a man named Ganesha announces that they need to capture the white ape again, and he requests help from other Familia available nearby as well. Belle is trying to lead the ape as far away as possible, while Hestia tries to find a way back to Belle through the tunnel somehow. By this time, Ais Wallenstein, aka the Sword Princess, had also accepted the job by Ganesha to kill the monsters running loose, while Belle ended up getting badly cornered just like he did against the Minotaur. Belle was seeing his death right in front of him when somehow Hestia arrives and he decides to take her back to safety. Belle was extremely worried about saving Hestia's life, but while the two were running away, Hestia kept motivating him. When the pair comes across a dead end, Hestia hands over the knife, which she named the Hestia knife. Upon first contact with Belle, the art of Hephaestus starts showing itself when the knife greatly increases all of Belle's stats, as the blade was designed to improve alongside its user. Belle puts on his usual crybaby show before he heads over to fight, and in a matter of seconds manages to slay the foe that was unbeatable only a few minutes ago. The crazy battle was witnessed by everyone in the neighborhood alongside Ais, and all of them praise Belle before Hestia finally faints from exhaustion. The unknown woman who had organized all this is also shown to be quite fascinated by Belle's performance, and later on, when Hestia gains consciousness, Belle starts crying again before he promises Hestia that he will stay close to her after thanking her for the expensive knife. The ape problem had somehow settled for Belkun, but somewhere in the dungeon, another problem seems to be ready to engage when we see a little girl named Lily being mistreated by a man named Ged Raish. The upgrade of his weapon makes Belle more confident as well, as now he was aiming to raid the 7th floor instead of the 5th. Iina tries to tell him that he is being crazy, but she ends up allowing it after she sees that Belle has reached E rank already. Iina still had some problems with letting Belle go just like that, so she asked them out shopping the next day. When the two meet up the next day, Belle is a little surprised after seeing how nice Iina looks in casual clothes. Iina decides to take Belle to the most expensive shopping market in the city named Babel, and while they were on their way inside the building, the two come across Hestia, who was trying her best to pay her debts back to Hephaestus. Hestia warns Iina to stay away after feeling a little jealous, and Iina takes Belle further ahead, where he buys some light armor of his liking at a relatively cheap price. The date concludes, and before the two part ways, Iina gives Belle some wrist armor as a gift, and advises him to have a supporter on his next adventure, as that would make things a lot easier. Later, Belle was heading back home when he comes across Lily from earlier and saves her from Ged after maid Ryu arrives to help him out. Belle is about to head over for his adventure the next morning when Lily approaches him as a supporter and forms a contract for the day. The pair goes through some successful progress, but Belle was unaware of the fact that Lily had her eyes on his knife all along. Belle later realizes that he messed up big time after Iina mentions his knife, and Lily, who had failed to sell the knife since it was a piece of junk away from Belle's hands. Lily was caught by Ryu in an alley, and she ran into Belle while trying to get away. Belle was happy to have his knife back, but seeing how he had no suspicion for Lily, Ryu lets the matter slide for now. Belle was quite happy with the day's progress, so he contracts Lily for the next day as well, and keeps on surprising her when he splits the loot evenly, something that Lily had never seen another adventurer do with her. Belle's adventure of the day concludes on a positive note, and we get a sneak peek into the dungeon where Ais was preparing to fight a dangerous enemy. When Belle was at work with Lily, somehow Hestia had seen the two together, and that made her extremely upset. After seeing Hestia act like a child, Belle offers to take her out on the next day, but when the meetup time comes, Hestia's loudmouth gets Belle surrounded by a ton of women, and hence the date turns into the two of them hiding around town. Hestia does mess up the date, but the two do manage to share a nice moment together when they watch the night sky filled with beautiful stars. While Belle was having fun with Hestia, Lily was getting beaten up by members of Souma Familia who snatched her earnings away from her. The Souma Familia was notorious for being troublesome at the guild, and Lily starts planning to steal Belle's knife yet again. Belle's extremely good behavior with her makes her question her own thoughts, and she gets the next day off from the dungeon to sort things out in her head. Belle visits Sire at the restaurant, and she lends him a book to read there. Belle reads the book without knowing that it actually was a grimoire, and that helps Belle in having his first ever magic spell called Firebolt. Hestia is absolutely shocked when the magicless Belle had unlocked the ability to cast spells, and she tells Belle to rest for now and test it out the next day. Having a spell was too much for Belle to stay calm, so his excitement leads him to the dungeon where he faints from overusing his magic. Ais was also returning from her boss battle when she finds Belle unconscious and decides to make up with Belle as he got embarrassed because of her earlier. Belle opens his eye in Aiz's lap and runs away after calling Aiz his mom by mistake. Belle realizes that he had caused a bigger problem back at home when the grimoire he read turned into a book with blank pages. The owner, Mamma Mia, lets Belle go this time, and while he was looking for Lily, Belle gets offered by Ged to steal from Lily together, but being the nice guy, Belle humbly declines. A little flashback shows us Lily's backstory, and we get to know how she was forced to work as a supporter due to being weak and small, and how the horrific behavior of adventurers with her led her to absolutely despise all of them. Later on, Aina was at Loki Familia's house, where she got to know about how the Souma family she had been hearing about recently was actually involved in the alcohol business, and they were not even following their leader anymore. This info starts adding to Aina's worry, and even Hestia tells Belle that getting involved with Lily is not safe, as sooner or later she will ditch Belle. Belle had already made up his mind at this point, and he continues to head over to the dungeon with Lily, who this time manipulates him into raiding the 10th floor. Aina ends up coming across Aiz, and in her worry for Belle, she requests her to look after him. Aiz was pretty depressed, thinking that Belle was scared of her, but she accepted the request gladly. Lily starts her plan by making Belle switch to a different weapon, and later abandons him in the middle of multiple orc monsters. Despite Belle calling her name, Lily heartlessly leaves him behind, remarking that he is just like other adventurers as well. But Lily herself gets into trouble a few minutes afterwards. First with Ged, and later on with Souma Familia, who makes her give away her bank locker key through blackmailing. After Lily was no longer useful to them, Souma Familia throws her to be eaten alive by monster ants, and Lily almost accepted her death until she was saved by Belle yet again. Lily is unable to fathom what is wrong with this guy, and she ends up asking Belle about it as well. Belle replies that he saved her since she is a girl, and even though that makes no sense, the two finally become true partners from that day onward. Belle meets up with Aina later on to have a word, and in the meanwhile, Aiz, who was the one helping Belle out with the orcs, is still disturbed since she couldn't apologize to Belle even now. After the two had set things out, Belle decides to take Lily back to Hestia, where even though she was not all that fond of her, Hestia accepts Lily and asks her to look over Belle. Belle runs out of the house after the women start fighting over him, and he is looking for Aina in the guild when he finds her having a word with Aiz. Being the coward that he is, Belle is trying to run away again, but Aiz doesn't let him go this time. The two apologize to each other, and after getting interested in Belle, Aiz offers to train him as he never really had any lessons before. The training session continues with Aiz, and even though Belle got a little roughed up in them, he starts seeing improvement. Belle's improvement was not enough for the unknown woman from earlier, who was Freya all along. In her desire to see Belle go hard, Freya orders one of her familia to head over to the dungeon and train a minotaur for using a weapon and fighting Belle. Belle's lessons with Aiz stretch over for the next few days, and even though he kept getting knocked out by her, Aiz was impressed by Belle's rate of improvement. While the two were having a word, Belle remarks that he is trying to get strong for a certain someone, and luckily for him, that certain someone also asks him out to grab lunch. Belle is seen with Aiz by Hestia, and despite being super jealous, she allows Belle to train with her for 2 more days. Belle realizes just how special Aiz really is after she had already reached level 6, and that gives him the drive needed to push further. Belle is over at the restaurant where Ryu tells him to start looking for a party, as adventuring alone will only get him so far in reaching his goal. The last day of Belle's training arrives, and by this time he had gotten way better, even trying to counterattack for the first time. Aiz wishes him the best of luck as she will be joining the Loki Familia expedition for the 18th floor. Belle also decides to start by raiding the 9th floor to polish himself a little. Belle's adventure was going smoothly, but as Freya wanted something more action-filled, her trained minotaur pulled up on Belle, leaving him stunned after finding his worst nightmare right in front of him. Lily gets knocked out instantly and Belle is forced to fight. He kept on going, but the level difference was still a bit too much for the fight to be fair. While passing by, Loki Familia notices him fighting, and Aiz is about to help again, but Belle's masculinity does not allow him to be saved by Aiz Wallenstein once again. The Wolfman Beatty is looking down on Belle again, but his opinion changes real quickly after Belle puts on an amazing show. Everyone other than Aiz is thinking that Belle would be dead meat, but with some smart battle tactics and guts to push beyond his limits, Belle fries the Minotaur from inside with his firebolts and passes away while standing victorious on his feet. everyone in Loki Familia is speechless after finding out how this kid already had all S-rank abilities, and with Bel's victory over his most feared foe, our recap comes to an end. Let us know in the comments if you guys want a part 2 of the show. Also, drop us a like and subscribe if you all enjoyed it. And as always, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.